Good day, dear students. Today's lecture's topic is History of Trends in European Language Teaching. There are three issues I would like to focus on: the grammar translation method, the direct method, and audio-lingual method. The grammar translation method was the predominant method in Europe during the 19th century. Some of the main proponents are Seitenstucker Johann, Johann Karl Plotz, and Meidinger. It's based on learning grammar rules and vocabulary of the knowledge of the language. One of the main objectives is that students become able to translate from one language to another. Reading and writing basically works, leaving aside the more oral expression and comprehension. Classes focuses on the teacher, who provides grammar rules and vocabulary to be memorized. Grammar is taught with explanations in the native language and only later applied in the production of sentences through translation from one language to another. The sentence is the basic unit of learning and practicing the language. Most sessions are based on the phrase translation from one language to another. The student's native language is a medium of instruction. That is, it's used to explain new items and to make comparisons between the target language and the native language. There are two principles of grammar translation methods. Translation interprets the words and phrases of a foreign language in the best possible way, and the second one, structures of language are best learned when compared and contrasted with the mother tongue. In this method, while the textbook is used, the teacher will translate every word and phrase from English into the mother tongue. The translation from one language to another is a very important goal that students should acquire. Authority in the classroom is the teacher, and key skills to be learned are reading and writing. The main features of the grammar translation method are the following. It is a way to study the language used by the detailed analysis of grammar rules, and focuses on the translation of phrases and texts of the language being learned. The mother tongue remains the reference system in the acquisition of the second language. Reading and writing are the main learning objectives. Reproduction and oral listening skills receive little attention. The selected vocabulary is based on the text used and is taught through a list of words with its translation equivalent. Students memorize. The sentence is the basic unit of learning and practice of new language. Most lessons are based on translation into the mother tongue. Accuracy is greatly emphasized. It's expected that students acquire competent translation skills. Grammar is taught deductively through presentation and study of grammatical rules, which are then practiced through translation exercise. The intent was to teach grammar in a systematic and organized way. The student's native language is the medium of instruction. It's used to explain new items and to make comparisons between the language learned and mother tongue. Also, there are some disadvantages of the grammar translation method. They are: it gives students an erroneous idea that a language is a collection of words that are isolated and independent. It increases student motivation since it leads to frustration and boredom. Equal relevance is not attributed to the four major skills of the language learning, like listening, speaking, reading, and writing. It involves less preparation of didactic lectures by the teacher, and the teacher's ability to speak English correctly is not taken into account. Almost no class time is allotted for students to produce their own sentences, and even less time to spend on oral practice like productive or reproductive. The classroom experience does not allow students to develop their style. There is often little contextualization of grammar. As we can see, The grammar translation method is very antiquated. It doesn't mean that we cannot use it at all, but we need to consider many other issues while teaching to our pupils. At some point and in some circumstances, the grammar translation method may be useful, but in general we recommend that it should not be overused. The next issue I would like to present is the direct methods. The direct method was born in France and Germany in the late 19th century and early 20th century and was consecrated in the United States with Sauver and Maximilian Berlitz. The appearance of this method was a response to dissatisfaction with the grammar translation method. Its creators argue that a language can be taught without translation or the use of the native language if learning is based on demonstration and action. The language is best taught using it actively in class, rather than using analytical procedures that focus on the explanation of grammatical rules. Teachers should encourage direct and spontaneous use of the language learned in class. Thus, students will be able to learn the language and include and induce grammatical rules. The vocabulary learned can be used to teach the new one using mime, shows, and clips. It involves the immersion of students in the target language in the same way that they learn their mother tongue. It is focused on preparing students to use the language in order to achieve a communication. All language learning is done in the language you want to learn, and new learning is taught orally. The new vocabulary is taught through demonstration and focuses primarily on speaking and listening, giving much importance to correct pronunciation. Students must devote much class to oral practice. In this slide, let's present the key principles of direct method. Illustrations in class are made exclusively in a target language. Students must learn to sing and communicate in the target language. Only learn the vocabulary and phrases every day during the initial phase of the class. In the following phrases, grammar, reading, and writing is introduced. Communicative skills are taught gradually using question-answer exchanges between teachers and students. The vocabulary is taught through demonstrations, objects, and images. Abstract vocabulary is taught by association of ideas. Both oral production and listening comprehension are taught. Correct pronunciation is emphasized. Also, it's important to reveal main features of the direct methods. Students must learn to sing and communicate in the target language. The role of students is not passive. Culture, like history, geography, day-to-day life of the speakers of the language, is studied. Vocabulary is emphasized. There are also the main disadvantages of the direct methods. They are: it's based on the idea that the target language can be learned exactly in the same way as the mother tongue. This is difficult because the conditions for the second language acquisition are very different from native language acquisition. In addition, the obligation to avoid using the native language often leads to complicated explanation in the target language. The second disadvantage is that results depend excessively on the qualities of the teacher, and not all teachers have enough time to adhere to the principle of these methods at a native level. Teaching conversation skills is not altogether practical if one takes into account the time available for learning foreign languages in school, though admittedly the method was successful in private language school, according to Berlitz, where paying clients were highly motivated and the use of native teachers was known. The state schools, it was perceived to have several drawbacks since it required teachers who were either native speakers or fluent in the foreign language. It was largely dependent on the teacher's skill rather than on a textbook, and not all teachers were proficient enough in the foreign language to adhere to the principle of this method. And the last issue I would like to focus on today is audio-lingual method. It appeared as a result of the need to possess good oral mastery of foreign language during and after World War II. We find this method named in different books of the 16th. Its well-defined principles were developed by Moulton between 1961 and 1963. It is closely linked to behaviorism, the elements of repetition and habit formation. This method proposes a learning process based on listening and oral production as opposed to writing and reading. The material presented is based especially on dialects and exercise as major learning techniques. In this method, the use of the mother tongue in the classroom is not recommended. Also, the use of the mother tongue in the classroom or materials is not as restrictive as it's in the direct method. The lessons are organized by grammatical structure and presented through short dialogues. Generally, students repeatedly hear different conversations and focus on mimicking the pronunciation and grammatical structures in the dialogue. Simple and active practice is emphasized. The intention is to prevent learning the language from being a mental burden and make it relative effort through repetition and imitation. The audio-lingual method has introduced memorizing dialects and imitative repetition as specific learning techniques. It is an interpretation of learning in terms of stimulus and response. The main objectives of this method are to develop oral proficiency in the language through a wide choice of vocabulary and to make the students capable of communicating using language learned automatically. Let's talk about the basic principles of audio-lingual method. They are: first principle, listening and oral production should be taught before writing and reading. The second one, instruction and exercise are given in the target language. Language forms occur within a context. Mistakes are carefully avoided because they lead to the formation of bad habits. The next principle is the teaching methods are geared to provide students with a native speaker model. Positive reinforcement helps students develop good habits. The teacher leads, guides, and controls the learning of students in the target language. Language is seen as culture-related. Dialect is a way to present vocabulary, structures, and is learned through repetition and imitation. Interaction occurs between student and teacher. The student imitates the teacher. And the last principle is importance is given to correct pronunciation, rhythm, and intonation. And finally, let's talk about some of the major weaknesses of audio-lingual methods. They are: repetition as a learning method is used, and no opportunity is given to students to create anything new or be spontaneous. Students become very good at the practice of speaking, but are unable to use their patterns fluently in natural communication context. It may be a mistake to regard audio-visual materials as a teaching method in themselves instead of as a didactic tool.